Shio walked over and opened up the front door to see Hikaru standing there with a solemn smile on her face. "Hey," Hikaru said simply. "Hey," Shio responded. They stood there in a brief, awkward silence before Hikaru just decided to walk past her into the dining area. Kona was sitting at the table and staring down at the ocean book that sat closed on its wooden surface. Delphi sat in Kona's lap while she rubbed her back gently. Hikaru and Shio sat at the table across from them, which got Kona to tear her eyes away from the book. "Hey, Hikaru," she mumbled. "Yeah, hey." Silence fell between them once again, and they all looked at the table. Where did they even start? They all knew why they were here. They knew what they wanted or needed to discuss, but none of them could find the words. What had happened just a few days prior, nothing could have prepared them for it. From what they had been told, it shouldn't have happened. Suddenly, a bright orb of light flew out from the direction of the courtyard. Tide, Reef, and Delphi watched it because as soon as they saw it, they thought they knew what it was. The same had happened to the girls before, after all. Lights appearing from their chests and their heart shells flying out of the ocean book. That's... Tide started. "That's the final heart shell!" Reef finished. The orb flew closer and closer to Takumi, but as they watched it, Delphi realized that something was wrong. This orb, it wasn't what she thought it was. "Wait a minute. No, that's not a heart shell feat," she said. "That's..." Takumi reached his hand above his head and grabbed the orb out of midair once it was above him. He then lowered his hand and held out the orb in front of himself, where it transformed into its proper form with another burst of light. "The Prince's Medallion feat!" "Mark my words. You are going to regret that you ever messed with me and the people I care about," he said. "This is a promise. I'm going to destroy you." Tide, Reef, and Delphi watched with eyes almost as wide as Seisha's. Sure, they knew that they were going to get a fourth teammate, but this way? And with the Prince's Medallion? What happened to the idea of the fourth heart shell being used by the fourth Precure? How was Takumi using the medallion? "Kaito-kun," Tide muttered. "The student council president is the fourth Precure?" Tide added. "The shining wings of the sea! Cure Nalu!" Takumi shouted. "In the name of the Ocean Kingdom, I will vanquish you from this world!" So, Hikaru hummed, trying to break the silence. "What exactly happened the other day?" I don't think any of us know," Shiro responded quietly. "Beyond the fact that we watched Kaito-kun transform, we don't know anything." "What do we do with the last heart shell, then? Does that mean we could have a fifth person become a Precure now?" Shio shrugged. "I guess so." Hikaru smiled nervously and looked at Kona, who still had her eyes glued to the book. "Why are you looking at the book?" Hikaru asked. "I don't know," Kona responded quietly. I don't understand." The scene of Takumi fighting kept playing and replaying in her mind. His sheer strength was unmatched. None of them had managed to muster that on their own, or arguably even together. His attitude as well. He just seemed like he knew what to do immediately, and did so without hesitation. All of them had questioned themselves and been shocked when they first transformed. But he didn't. He just fought, and it seemed it was to protect them. "I wonder if there's some magic similar to the Precures that exists within the Prince's Medallion," she hypothesized. "That's not an impossibility, I guess," Shio muttered. "Do you think that's what happened, Delphi?" Kona asked. Delphi shook her head. "I don't know, Fee." "Do you have any of your own ideas?" "I don't know, Fee. It just doesn't make sense at all, Fee." Delphi's mind kept running wildly and loudly with thoughts, just like the others. The prince had given his life trying to prevent the sirens from stealing his medallion, and yet some random human boy was able to scream, threaten the sirens for a few seconds, and gain the ability to use it? If it was that easy for him, could it be taken from him if he wasn't careful during a fight? Under the right circumstances, could the sirens say or do the right thing and gain the ability to use the medallion themselves? Just the minuscule prospect of that happening terrified Delphi.
I think we need to take the medallion back from him, Fee, she muttered.
But, well, I mean, you saw how well he fought against that Kirai Mizu. Don't you think we could use that strength to our advantage? Hikaru asked. I don't think any of the three of us have ever come close to mustering that strength on our own, or together. If Kaito-kun joined us, we could defeat the sirens much easier.
I don't know, Fee. I just don't want to take even the slightest risk of the medallion falling into the wrong hands, Fee. You girls know what would happen if that occurred, Fee.
Maybe this is just me preaching to the choir, but I don't think Kaito-kun having the medallion is a bad thing, Shio said. I mean, he is the leader of the student council. He is a very trustworthy person.
But this isn't just a simple piece of jewelry, Fee. It's an object connected to the magic that exists all throughout everything in the Ocean Kingdom, Fee. If it were to fall into the wrong hands, then...
Mid-sentence, something occurred to Delphi. Her eyes went slightly wide and her mouth fell open. The girls looked at her quizzically.
An object connected to the magic that exists all throughout everything in the Ocean Kingdom, Fee.
Delphi? Kona asked. Delphi began to squirm around a bit and whine, so Kona loosened her arms, which allowed the fairy to jump off of her lap and land on the floor. She took a nervous breath and placed her fins together.
Kudu power!
A light twinkled from between her fins before it began to glow much brighter. It then completely engulfed Delphi's body, and her silhouetted form began to change shape. She grew taller and taller until she took on the form of a human child. Then, with a small burst of light, the light engulfing her body dissipated, and there she stood, now in the form of a human. Delphi's hair was a light purple with a light blue gradient at the base. On the top of her head was the same pink bow that had been wrapped around her dorsal fin in her fairy form. She wore a near white dress, accented by gold trimmings, and pink fabric wrapped just below her waist. She also wore purple shoes, with gold bands on her ankle and thigh, transparent purple sleeves, and an indigo cape, the underside being a light pink. The girls' eyes went wide. "Delphi?" they nearly shouted. Delphi opened her eyes and looked down at herself. She was in her human form. She hadn't been able to take on this form once since she had been freed from the ocean book. No matter how hard she had tried, she just hadn't been able to do it. She didn't have the power to do so. Her eyes filled with tears. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob from an odd mix of joy, surprise, and outright depression. Kona, Shio, and Hikaru exchanged sympathetic looks before Kona stood up, kneeled down in front of Delphi, and wrapped her arms around her. Delphi returned the gesture while continuing to sob into Kona's shoulder. Kona just held her without saying a word. Shio and Hikaru only watched with saddened expressions. After a few more minutes, Delphi's sobs subsided into quiet sniffles, but she still clung to Kona. Kona rubbed her back gently. "Are you okay?" she finally asked.
I don't know, Fee,
she stuttered quietly.
I haven't been able to take on my human form since you freed me, Fee. The last time I used this form was when Prince Nalu and I were fleeing the kingdom, Fee. The power, my magic, it's been diminished ever since then, Fee. After trying so many times in secret, I just gave up, Fee."
"What compelled you to try again?"
"The medallion and that boy, Fee. As I said before, the prince's medallion is an object connected to the magic that exists all throughout everything in the Ocean Kingdom, Fee. His transformation must have released enough of that power that I was able to regain the ability to shift forms again, Fee,"
Delphi explained.
"I thought maybe I should try one more time, since the medallion is inherently connected to my magic as well as everyone else's in the kingdom, Fee."
Kona looked up at Shio and Hikaru. It seems they had found another thing they wanted to address when they talked with Takumi later. "Alright, you two need to calm down. I am absolutely sick of your fighting, and I can't take hearing it anymore. Either shape up or you will face severe consequences." Scarp glared down at her underlings. Locke and Ooze, as she chastised them after getting into another very loud fight, one that had awoken her from yet another nap, probably the fifth this week. The two only looked at the ground in shame, while secretly cussing out each other in their minds. If only Ooze would just learn her place and shut the fuck up. I can't take her bullshit superiority complex. I wish Locke was less of a bitch and would just listen to everyone else. She isn't the only one who's part of this crusade. We're terribly sorry, Scarp-sama, Ooze said quietly. I don't believe you. You both utter apologies every single time you are reprimanded, but nothing ever changes. You both continue to fight and scream and cause a ruckus. You disturb the rest of us every single day. I'll believe you once you actually change your actions and I can finally take a proper nap. Until then, I can't and won't believe a single apology that exits your pathetic mouths. Ooze bit the inside of her cheek. Understood. Scarp took a deep breath to try and calm her anger. If this keeps happening, then I will be forced to. The door to the lair suddenly slammed open, and the entire cavern shook. Loose pebbles and rocks in the ceiling fell to the ground, and one of the plant pots they had on a table fell to the ground as well. The three sirens jumped and looked at the door with surprise, and saw Seish. Seish looked distraught. She was disheveled, and her eyes were wide. She looked like she was staring a million miles off into space. She never barged into a room, and never appeared like this. Scarp scowled at the sudden entrance of her inferior, and also at knowing she would have to clean up the room later. Seish, what is the meaning of the... Scarp began in a scolding tone. I have an urgent update, Seish interrupted, slightly out of breath. Excuse me? Seish, what are you... It's about the prince's medallion. Their eyes all went wide. The medallion? Did you finally succeed in taking it? Scarp asked, deciding to put aside Seish's lack of manners for the time being. She was slightly hopeful that they might finally be making progress on their mission. It had been way too long, and the king was becoming impatient. He was demanding results, and Scarp was running out of excuses. No, it's fallen into the hands of another human. She really needed to stop jumping to conclusions. Scarp's eyes widened even further, but her eyebrows lowered in anger. What did you just say? I attacked the Precure as planned using a Kidai Mizu powered by the confidence power of 3 humans. I had successfully overpowered them, but another human came out of nowhere and somehow used the power of the medallion to transform into a 4th Precure. What? Ooze said in shock. A human used the medallion? Locke added. This kid was strong. Stronger than any of the other Precure, and far stronger than any Kidai Mizu we have the ability to produce right now. He stopped its punch by simply lifting his own arm. He picked it up and threw it over his head. He subdued it in the matter of only a few attacks, Seish explained. It was too much. He single-handedly managed to defeat the Kidai Mizu without any help from the others. This is a very serious development, Scarp growled and turned around. How could a human use the medallion's power? That should be impossible. Yeah, how would he have been able to use his power when he's just a random human? Ooze asked. Even the Precure and that fairy haven't been able to use it. I don't know, Scarp muttered. It doesn't make sense. All I ever knew about it was that only the cursed prince could use it. He's the only one who could harness its full power, and that's the reason why we can't access what we need in the Ocean Kingdom. He locked it away with that power. Scarp hummed as she thought. Seish, you said this kid used the medallion to transform into a 4th Precure, correct? What was his name? Scarp asked. He said his name was Nalu. Nalu. The same name as the prince, Scarp muttered. So what, did the prince's spirit just appear to give him the power or some shit? Locke asked. Is the kid maybe a messenger for the prince? Seish added. I never did believe in ghosts. Why would the prince's spirit showing up even make sense? He's dead! The prince is dead! We killed him, didn't we? Ooze asked in a somewhat desperate, angry tone. We did. I made absolutely sure of it. Scarp replayed the moment in her head. The feeling of pushing her sword through his chest. The sounds of his desperate screams as he tried to fight back. The smell of his blood. She could remember every sensation, every emotion. every single little bit of the thrill. She laughed quietly as she remembered. She watched as the blood seeped from his chest, as he laid on the ground, slowly and painfully exhaling his last breaths. It felt as real as the day she'd done it, and boy wasn't it one of her favorite memories. The other sirens watched Scarp with a collective, confused expression. Scarp-sama? Sage said. Scarp snapped back to reality, shook her head, and coughed slightly before turning to face the others once again. Regardless, Scarp said as if she hadn't just zoned off, all we can do right now is to keep trying and moving forward with the mission. We cannot go without that medallion. It is the only way we can secure victory for our king, so we must secure it at any cost. But what can we do? If he's as strong as Seish is saying he is, then we stand zero chance of defeating him and taking it from him, Locke protested. You are right. Such a strong adversary appearing so suddenly is a big wrench being thrown into the plan. We will have to regroup and strategize so we can have a newer, solid plan for defeating him and the other Precure and taking that medallion. The medallion is our only goal at this point. If that fairy can't harness its power, she is useless to us and we shouldn't worry about capturing her any longer. All we need is the medallion, so I need all of you to put your efforts into taking it. Locke nodded. Understood. Scarp sighed and turned back around to face the wall. What an annoying turn of events. This is just going to make things even harder for us, she muttered. Either way, Locke, you're going out next. Use the same strategy Seish did with your Kidai-Mizu to make it as strong as possible. Follow that boy and attack him when he's alone and more vulnerable. If he doesn't have the others to back him up, we may have just the slightest chance of gaining the upper hand. Whatever your strategy, just make sure you take the medallion. Understood. Locke got up and swam to her room to start planning her next outing. Scarp-sama, Seish asked. Yes, Seish. Not having the medallion in our possession is a massive step backwards for us, but I think it could symbolize some kind of hope for our mission. How so? Prince Nalu is dead, and we were always under the impression that he was the only one that could use the medallion. But if a random human can use the medallion, maybe there's still a chance that we can use its power as well. If we can figure out how he was able to harness its power, maybe we can do the same thing. You make a good point, Scarp mumbled. Still, I worry about the possibility that we won't be able to fully use it. We've been at this for so long, and we've only come across it recently. I hope your theory is correct, Seish. Seish nodded in response. Scarp sighed once more and began swimming out of the room. The king needs to finish that sooner rather than later. We can't afford to keep waiting and losing chances by waiting on him. If he wants us to complete our mission quickly, we need that now. The doorbell rang and Shio got up to open the door. When she did, she was greeted by the friendly, smiling face of the student council president, Takumi Kaito. Hello, Yumiko-san, he said in his usual happy tone. Hey, Kaito-kun, she said, and then moved aside to let him in. He took off his shoes and then walked to the dining room table. Shio followed him and returned to her seat. Hey, guys, he said cheerfully as he took a seat in the empty chair next to Kona. Hey, Kona responded, trying and failing not to sound like she was nervous. Is everything okay? You guys all seem, I don't know, different? Sadder? Nervous? You're usually a lot more chipper than this. Yeah, we're fine. And we're not sad. We need to talk to you about some things. About the whole Precure thing, right? Kona nodded. Yeah, sort of figured. I'm not sure where we should start, but we should... The medallion fee! Delphi jumped up from seemingly out of nowhere, in the space between Kona and Takumi's chairs. Both of them jumped backwards, with Takumi specifically yelping slightly. Gah! What? Who are you? He asked, leaning backwards in his chair slightly. Tell me you have the medallion with you, Fee! Please show me that you have the medallion, Fee! With a quizzical look on his face, Takumi reached into his pocket and pulled out the object. Delphi's eyes widened and she immediately went to grab it from his hand. However, she stopped just short and retracted her hands.
I shouldn't be so rash about this fee, she thought. Thank you for keeping it safe, fee.
Yeah, you're welcome, he said and set the medallion on the table, his confused expression still on his face. So, what exactly did you all want to discuss? We want to talk about how you became a Precure the other day, Shio said. We don't know how it happened, and no matter how much we've talked to each other and thought about it, we can't come to a solid conclusion or theory. That's why we invited you over to talk. We thought we could get a better understanding of what happened if we talked to you directly, Kona explained. Was it really that odd? Takumi asked. They all nodded.
Kona, Shio, and Hikaru all became Precure in very similar ways, fee. They all stood up to the sirens in moments of courage, and the bravery they exuded during those moments connected with their heart shells, fee. The power that was created is what they used to transform and fight, fee.
The girls all set their heart shells on the table. I was attacked when I first met Delphi, Kona started. I was exploring a shipwreck, and hidden underneath the floorboards in one of the rooms was a small box. That box held all 4 heart shells, the ocean book, and the prince's medallion. And that's this thing? Takumi asked, pointing to the medallion. Kona nodded. Once I opened the book, Delphi just flew out of it and began explaining to me everything about the Precure and the Ocean Kingdom. Shortly after that is when we were attacked by Locke, one of the sirens. We tried to escape, but she caught up to us before we could. At some point, I stood up to her and I was able to transform into a Precure, Kona explained. In the moment before I transformed, I remember feeling a swell of courage to protect my family and friends. My grandparents, Corinne, I couldn't let them be put in harm's way by any kind of threat. I also promised Delphi to help her on her mission to find the Precure as long as she helped me search for my biological parents. I couldn't pass up that chance, and I guess the courage I felt in that moment is what caused me to transform. For me, I met Kona and learned of the Precure when she came on land for the first time. It was actually just after our meeting at the Cove where we were making preliminary plans for the school festival, Shio said. Really? Takumi asked. Yeah, it was right after I brought you your notebook. When I went back down to get my water bottle, she was there. Man, I could have met you earlier? Damn, I was so close, Takumi said with a smile that was very quickly shifted into one of confusion. Wait, you're a legit mermaid? Like, you were born one? Yeah, Kona said with an equally nervous laugh. Wow, Takumi hummed in awe. I just assumed you were a human like the rest of us. Kona laughed nervously. Anyways, Shio continued, when I got back down and saw her, I was also shocked because up until then, I had of course thought mermaids were just a myth as well. Seeing one right in front of me was shocking, and I assumed she was just a human in a costume at first. Once I got over the shock, Delphi made herself known, and they explained the whole Precure thing as well as the mission we were to embark on. I agreed to help them, and then we were attacked. I've always wanted to help people to the best of my ability, and when I saw Kona fighting and struggling against that siren alone, I knew I had to do something to help her. The emotions I was feeling in that moment is what I believe allowed me to transform and help her. That makes sense. You're always helping with the student council even outside of the duties of your position. I can absolutely see you standing up to help someone struggling in a fight, Takumi said. Well, that's just my job as the secretary. Even so, we all really appreciate it. Shio smiled sheepishly. Thank you. All right, my turn, Hikaru said loudly and stood up in a dramatic fashion. We were in the park one day, and my bestest friend in the whole wide world decided to visit me at my dad and I's beloved takoyaki shop because she just loves to give us business. Shio rolled her eyes. I witnessed the fight in the park. I witnessed Shio and Kona turn into magic fighting warriors and take down the beast with such amazing power. But of course, when a superhero's secret is revealed, that throws a wrench into the mission and threatens not only their safety, but the safety of their friends and family as well, Hikaru continued. I had to have a talk with them right in this very room about what a Precure was and how a small dolphin could not only talk, but also fly. Well, now I guess she can also become a small child too, so I guess the flying bit isn't so far out of the question after all.
feet. I'm not a child feet, Delphi protested. But in the middle of the conversation, another monster appeared, and the fearless warriors had to dash out of the house at the speed of light to fend off the fiend. But alas, they left behind 2 heart shells, so their noble, brave friend had to follow them into battle to return them at once.
Okay, cool it with the theatrics, Hikaru, Shio said. Just tell the story.
Aw, but I was having fun, Hikaru whined. But anyways, I tried to return the heart shells, but got caught up in the battle since it had already started by the time I showed up. I tried to confront the siren and help Kona and Shio, but she started attacking some of my insecurities to try and weaken me. But luckily, I had some great friends cheering for me and encouraging me.
Hikaru flashed a warm smile at Shio. Shio's face flushed red, and she immediately averted her eyes.
Their encouragement helped me feel secure in my own skin again, and I found the courage to fight back. That gave me the ability to transform and help defeat the siren.
Wow. So you all got your powers from moments where you showcased your courage and bravery? I like that, Takumi said. But I guess I still don't understand. What was so different about me? Did I not do the same thing?
That's what we want to figure out, Fee, Delphi said.
I mean, I guess what you did certainly was brave, because if I had been in your situation, I probably would have been too weak to fight back and would have just played dead, Hikaru joked. That or I would have just shit my pants. Shio shook her head.
I agree. What you did certainly was brave, she said. But the other part of what you did to unlock your powers was different. It almost looked as if you were angry instead of courageous to me.
Takumi raised an eyebrow.
Takumi-kun, please tell us what you felt and experienced before and when you transformed, Fee. Maybe we can understand how you transformed if you tell us what was going through your mind, Fee.
Well, I guess it started when we were eating lunch and saw that weird energy dome. Looking at it gave me a very sick feeling, like I would throw up at any second. I'm not sure what I was feeling, but it was somewhere between fear and anger. I don't know exactly. I was just deeply unsettled, he explained. And it was weird. The feeling felt oddly familiar. It felt nostalgic in a way. But the thing is, I have zero memory of when I would have ever felt anything similar. And then when you guys ran off to fight, I felt even more scared. I didn't know you guys were the Precure at that point, so all I understood was that my friends were running into danger. Kona looked down at her hand as she remembered him grabbing it when they first ran off.
Kona, wait! He shouted. Kona, it looks extremely dangerous. I don't know what it is, but that dome gives me a very sick feeling in my gut, and I don't want you guys putting yourself in harm's way. What if it's another one of those monsters that showed up in the park? Kona, you guys can't go.
When I followed you to the courtyard, I saw you guys transform and I was shocked. I had seen you fighting in the park before, but learning that such powerful girls were people I knew, I was shocked. Just completely shocked. But I knew I had to keep my distance since I couldn't fight myself, Takumi continued. But when I saw Kona get hurt by that monster... Takumi's voice trailed off. He seemed to be staring off into space and looked like he had just lost his train of thought in the middle of his sentence. However, he was also clenching his fist. His fist was shaking ever so slightly in a way that seemed like he might be angry. Takumi? Kona prodded cautiously. Takumi blinked and shook his head at Kona's voice. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember what happened. You don't remember? No, I do. Let's see. Rooftop, chasing you guys into the courtyard, seeing you transform, watching you fight. Seeing Kona get hurt, Takumi mumbled, his voice trailing off again. What did happen after that? Things fell silent as everyone eyed Takumi with confusion.
Well,
Shio hummed to break the silence.
After me and Hikaru got pinned to the fence and Kona was injured, you just stood up and began yelling at Seish. Yeah, you just started arguing with her and shouting at her for coming into the school and wrecking shit. You yelled at her for putting all the students in danger, Hikaru added. And your expression, you looked so angry. It honestly looked like you were a completely different person.
You kept shouting and shouting at her, but eventually Seish attacked you as well. But it didn't seem to affect you at all, Shio continued. While it was slow and shaky, you immediately stood back up, declared you would destroy Seish, and that's when it happened. When I transformed? Takumi asked. They nodded. Then when you began to fight, you were strong, scarily strong. You had more power than anything we've managed to do together. You stopped the Kiraimizu's punch by lifting your arm and catching it in your hand. You flipped it over your head and slammed it into the ground. You punched it with the force of a crashing airplane. It was insane how strong you were, Shio explained. Really? How? How did I manage to do all of that? Takumi asked while looking at his hand.
Well, just like the others, there was a bright light that exploded from the power in your heart, Fee, Delphi said. Everything seemed like it should, Fee. You had unlocked the power of the Precure, and you were ready to transform and fight alongside them, Fee. But the thing is, you didn't summon a heart shell like the others, Fee.
Delphi pointed to the medallion.
You summoned and transformed using the medallion, Fee.
Takumi looked down at the object and picked it up, turning it over in his hand several times as he observed it. What was so special about it? What is it exactly? He asked.
This is the Prince's medallion, Fee. It once belonged to the Prince of the Ocean Kingdom, Fee.
The Prince of the Ocean Kingdom? Takumi muttered, without looking up for the medallion. Delphi nodded.
The Ocean Kingdom was my home, Fee. The Prince was my very best friend, and he...
Delphi suddenly shook her head.
I'm sorry, I haven't even properly introduced myself, Fee,
Delphi said and bowed.
My name is Delphi, and I am the royal advisor to Prince Nalu of the Ocean Kingdom, Fee.
Takumi's brow furrowed.
The Ocean Kingdom was in a parallel world, Fee. It was a wonderful world of both land and oceans in a similar way to this world, Fee. Mermaids and sea fairies lived together in a very peaceful manner under the guidance of Prince Nalu, my best friend, Fee.
Prince Nalu, Takumi mumbled.
Prince Nalu was loved by everyone in the kingdom as he was very kind and generous. He spent his time helping those in need and made sure everyone in the kingdom was as equal as possible, Fee. His goal was to undo the unjust corruption left behind by his parents, and he was very much successful, Fee. Everyone respected him, and he loved everyone just as much, Fee, Delphi continued. He loved them so much that he even gave his life for the kingdom, Fee.
Takumi's eye twitched. This was so much information, and he didn't understand any part of it. The Ocean Kingdom? Mermaids? Sea fairies? A prince? It all just seemed like a story from an especially imaginative child. But he also knew it had to be real, since he'd transformed and fought off a monster with some kind of magical powers. He was so confused and felt a headache brewing. This prince... a kingdom... I don't understand. Takumi grit his teeth and put his hand on his forehead. Takumi, are you okay? Kona asked. Yeah, I'm fine. I just have a bit of a headache right now. I've been getting them a lot lately, he said. Did you need any medicine? Shio asked and stood up. No, it's okay. I can handle it. Thank you, though, Yumiko-san. Shio nodded and sat back down. Sorry about that, Delphi, Takumi said. What happened to this Prince Nalu?
The Ocean Kingdom was attacked and decimated by an evil force of Sirens, Fee. They were led by their king, and they destroyed everything above and below the water, Fee, Delphi explained, her voice quiet. Prince Nalu and I were among the only remaining survivors of the initial attack, Fee. We fled the kingdom and came to this world in search of the Precure, since according to legend, they were the only ones who could help the kingdom, Fee. We were fine for a few days, but the Sirens eventually caught up with us and intercepted the ship, Fee. Prince Nalu sealed me away in his journal, so me, the heart shells, and his medallion would be safe and out of the Sirens' reach, Fee.
And the prince... Takumi started. Delphi nodded, her expression turning sad.
He stayed behind to try and fight off the Sirens on his own, Fee. But he wasn't able to finish them off, Fee. He was killed in the fight, Fee.
Delphi, I'm so sorry, Takumi said.
It's okay, Fee. He left me with the mission of finding the Precure and reviving the Ocean Kingdom, so by doing so, his memory and his efforts to protect his people continue to live on, Fee. I want people to remember the prince for his efforts to do anything for his people, Fee.
You know, I just had a thought, Hikaru interjected. If we are able to revive the kingdom once we defeat the sirens, do you think we could also bring the prince back to life?
I don't know, Fee. I've never thought of that being a possibility, Fee.
If we can revive an entire kingdom from dust with our powers, it isn't far-fetched that we could resurrect someone, right? I guess not, Shio agreed. We can always try when we get to that point. Okay, so let me get this straight, Takumi said, trying to bring the attention back to the previous conversation. You're from a different world, and you're in search of the Precure, because they can save your world and potentially resurrect your prince.
Yes, Fee.
I still don't understand what this has to do with me becoming a Precure, though.
My apologies, Fee. I totally got off track, Fee,
Delphi exclaimed.
This medallion, the object you used to transform, it once belonged to Prince Nalu, Fee. It was given to him by his parents and is the key to the remaining magic we have hidden away in the ruins of the kingdom, Fee. If the Siren King were to get his hands on the medallion and unlock that magic, that would spell disaster for this world, Fee. It's what the sirens are after every time they attack, Fee.
I thought they were also after human confidence power, Shio said.
They are, Fee. I don't know why, but it may be an alternate source of energy for the king's plan, Fee,
Delphi postured.
But regardless, their main goal is obtaining that medallion, which absolutely cannot happen, Fee.
So why did I use it to transform? Takumi asked.
I don't know, Fee. Based on everything the prince told me when he was alive, it doesn't make any sense, Fee. I was always told that he was the only one who could use it because it was specifically tied to him in some way, Fee.
Do you think that tie broke when he died? Shio asked.
I don't know, Fee.
Wait. Okay, here's an idea, Hikaru said a little too dramatically. Maybe the prince isn't fully dead. Maybe his spirit was, fused with the medallion. There might have been some weird magical funniness that happened when Kaito-kun saw Kona and us in danger, and that's what gave him the ability to transform. I solved it! Oh, come on now, Hikaru. There's no way the spirit of some dead person is possessing the medallion, Shio stated. You seriously believe that after we all transformed into magical girls to fight off evil water monsters? Point taken. Anyways, Hikaru continued, I also wonder if maybe our sex has something to do with it. Like, me, Kona, and Shio are all females, so maybe that's why Kaito-kun couldn't use the other hard shell. Maybe his reaction to seeing Kona get hurt caused some sort of reaction that then led to some sort of miracle that then released a prince's spirit that then led to Kaito-kun transform. Hikaru, breathe, Shio scolded. Hikaru laughed nervously. Sorry, but think about it. Maybe something like that did happen. I'm open to anything at this point. Maybe Kaito-kun's transformation released some amount of energy from the Ocean Kingdom, which is also what allowed Delphi to regain her human form, Shio added.
Again, I don't know, Fee, Delphi said. But what I do know is that it's now your responsibility to watch over the medallion and keep it safe, Takumi-kun, Fee. If it will give you the power to transform and fight, then you will need to keep it and make sure it is safe, Fee. We will all help you, of course, but when we're not with you, you have to make sure it is on your person or somewhere secure, Fee.
Takumi picked up the medallion once more and eyed its shiny, indigo surface. He still didn't fully understand everything about the kingdom or this prince, but he knew Delphi was right. If everything they were saying was true, then the medallion was in near constant danger of being stolen by the sirens. Of course, if it's to protect this world and its people, I will protect it with my life. Shio, Hikaru, and Delphi's eyes widened at Takumi's statement. They hadn't expected him to sound so dedicated and passionate. That's a little dramatic, Hikaru murmured to herself. I don't know if it's a good idea, though. Everyone looked at Kona, who had been mostly quiet for the duration of their discussion. What do you mean? Takumi asked. Up until you transformed, we were able to have the medallion under near constant surveillance between attacks because we kept it in the ocean book. But if you have the medallion, doesn't that mean it's likely that the sirens will target you when you're alone? Kona asked.
What if they launch an attack on you when you were somewhere we can't easily reach? What if they find a new strategy that they use to overpower you? What if they attack you when you're unprepared and you're unable to transform because they try to take it? Who knows what could happen to you?
Hey, it'll be okay, Kona. Takumi placed his hand on her shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. If they do attack me unprompted, I'll be able to fight back. From what I gather from this conversation, I guess I'm a lot stronger than you guys expected, so I might be able to handle a surprise attack. Worst case scenario, I'll contact you guys so you can come help me.
But what if we can't make it in time?
Hey, it'll be okay. I promise. I'll be careful.
Okay, but please call us immediately if you're in danger. I don't want you getting caught in a situation you can't handle and then getting hurt.
I promise, Takumi said with a warm smile. Kona blushed and looked down at her lap. So, is there anything else we need to discuss? I told my mom I would stop at the store to get some things she needs for dinner on my way home, and I'd like to get going if I can, so I'm not late. I think we covered everything we wanted to, Shio said. We may not have found all of the answers we wanted, but all of us are still very new to the Precure and saving the world thing, so I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Agreed, Fee. It was good getting a chance to talk to you and see things from your perspective, Fee. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Takumi-kun, Fee.
Of course. I'll see you guys later. I'll see you out, Shio said. Both of them stood up and walked towards the door. Hikaru looked at Kona and smirked. Your face is awfully red, Kona.
Huh?
You're blushing. Is it because you're worried about Takumi because you like him?
What? No,
He's our friend, and I always worry about my friends. Back home, I always worry about Corinne, and here I worry about you and Shio. I don't want any of my friends being put in danger, so if it were any of you in Takumi's position, I would be worried about you too. Mm-hmm. Sure.
I'm serious. Stop bickering, you 2 feet. Don't you have homework to do, Feet?
Hikaru pouted. Don't remind me.
Takumi walked down the driveway and then began his trek down the street and out of the neighborhood. It was a bit of a long walk to the grocery store from Shio's house, but today he didn't mind. He had a lot on his mind, and the walk would give him time to think everything over. As a kid, he'd always wanted to be a superhero. He wanted to fly around and fight crime while saving the world every so often. He and his friends would always pretend to be superheroes at school, and they even gave themselves their own monikers as well. He was like any little boy, but now it seemed that childish delusion was coming true. Some kind of magical energy emerged from within him, and he had transformed into some kind of warrior to fight off a humongous monster. That, and he wasn't the only one. He had teammates, one of which wasn't even human. This had only ever been a dream for him, and yet here he was, living that dream. There was also the fact that all of the information he'd been given about how and why he transformed was incredibly confusing. He apparently wasn't even supposed to be a warrior like them because he didn't summon the same object as the others. The object he did summon once belonged to a prince of a decimated kingdom that he now also had to try and find a way to revive. How had he managed to find himself inside the plot of a fantasy story? Thinking about the prince, too, the story he'd been told about him felt oddly familiar. He thought about it, trying to recall where he'd heard the story. The story of a prince fighting and dying for his kingdom. X ran up the stairs and to the surface, fully aware of the threat he would soon be facing. There, X saw the enemy glaring down at X with a sick sense of pleasure and yearning. Oh, how they wanted to fight X and slaughter X. It's time for you to surrender and give up your magic, X. You can't resist any longer. Your kingdom is already gone. That is never going to happen. I am not going to surrender to someone who has taken everything from me, to someone who has ruined my life. But I will fight to protect what I have left, even if I die trying. Your choice. The enemy charged at X, and a fierce battle ensued. Their weapons clashed, with sparks flying everywhere from the sheer force of impact. One would land a hit, then the other. Back and forth, blows were delivered and their strength was slowly whittled down. But the enemy had the upper hand. In the blink of an eye, X was covered in blood from a devastating blow. X fell to X's knees, and then to the ground.
Oh yeah, Takumi said to himself. That movie I saw a few years ago. Takumi was weirdly thrilled he'd figured out where he'd recognized that story. It was such a familiar storyline, and he'd been racking his brain trying to figure out why. Lo and behold, it was just a movie. He told himself he would have to rewatch it again sometime soon, because he remembered it being really well made, and he wanted to remember more of the details. Takumi placed his hand in his pocket and pulled out the medallion. He looked at its surface and smiled. It sure was beautiful for something so simple. It was just a locket that had golden edges with an indigo-colored gem on the front and a pearl as an accent. It shimmered at nearly every angle in the sun and even seemed to give off visions of a rainbow as well. The inside had a mirror on the top compartment and 3 pearls on the bottom. The bottom compartment was also decorated with shells and other aquatic symbols etched into it. It made sense for something so powerful to look so pretty. I wonder if I can actually keep this thing safe. Takumi stopped walking as he observed the medallion. The scene from the movie re-entered his mind and began to replay over and over and over. His eye twitched as the headache from earlier seemed to return. What was the name of that movie? He mumbled. Takumi's eyes widened. He barely had time to turn around and jump out of the way of Locke's sudden attack. He landed on his right foot incorrectly and fell onto his stomach. He groaned and looked up to see a large, dark spike sticking out of the ground where he had just been standing previously. Ah, man, I was hoping that would crush you and I wouldn't have to fight you, Locke said in a teasing tone. Takumi glared at her and pushed himself to his feet. What do you want? He shouted. Damn, you're dumber than Seish made you out to be, Locke mumbled. I want you to hand over that medallion to me right now. Absolutely not. I guess I wasn't clear the first time. Hand over the medallion, or else I will kill you. And I guess you didn't understand the first time either. The answer is no. Well, you are the newbie in regards to all this, so I don't think you fully understand the situation in front of you. If you do not hand over the medallion immediately, I will end your sad, pathetic, miserable existence right here. If you choose to cooperate with me, however, I will gracefully spare you and your dumbass friends, Locke snarled. Oh, and the others will also be killed if you don't cooperate. All of your lives will be ended in an instant. Your threats don't scare me. I know what will happen to this world if I let you have the medallion. You may end up sparing the lives of me and my friends, but you would use the power of the medallion to destroy this world and kill everything and everyone living within it. What would be the point of being spared and then being forced to live in a world like that? You really believe the lies those other Precure spewed. How naive of you. I don't care if they could be lying to me. At least they're not trying to harm innocent people. Locke glared at Takumi. This is your last chance, Locke said through gritted teeth. Hand over the medallion, now! In your dreams! Takumi held out the medallion. The medallion opened and Takumi ran his finger over the 3 pearls inside, starting his transformation with a torrent of water and feathers. Let's dive in! Precure, marine splash! So it is you after all, the 4th Precure, Locke muttered. The shining wings of the sea! Cure Nalu! Takumi shouted. In the name of the Ocean Kingdom, I will vanquish you from this world. Let's get this over with. Get him, Kirai Mizu. Kill him and take that medallion.
Kirai Mizu!
The Kirai Mizu threw its fist towards Nalu as it bellowed. Nalu only smirked and held out his left arm. This move had worked last time, so he knew how to stop it. This was going to be an easy fight. You really think that will work on me? Guess you didn't pay attention when Seish told you about me. The Kirai Mizu's fist hit Nalu's hand, but this time, it wasn't stopped. Nalu's eyes widened as he was thrown backwards several feet from the force of the impact. He rolled a few times and then skidded to a stop. He groaned and then tried to push himself up on his arms. What the... The Kirai Mizu bellowed again and threw its other fist towards Nalu. His eyes widened and he quickly crossed his arms in front of himself. This action created his shield, a seafoam green, seashell-shaped shield. It managed to stop the Kirai Mizu's fist, although the shield and Nalu's arms shook greatly from the force. "Oh? Now this is an interesting turn of events, isn't it?" Locke taunted. Nalu quickly and forcefully uncrossed his arms, which was powerful enough to send the Kiraimezu stumbling backwards just a little. He then took the chance to stand back up and try to reevaluate the situation. "Seish was so panicked the other day that you were so strong because you managed to stop her Kiraimezu's punch with just your hand, and yet here you are, unable to do the exact same thing to me. I guess I am better than her. That, or you're just not that strong at all." Locke began to laugh in her usual maniacal tone. Nalu frowned and looked down at his hand. "She's right. That strength I had last time, it's gone. I couldn't stop the Kiraimezu," Nalu thought and clenched his fist. "Well, I guess I can gloat once I get back. Right now I want to have some fun crushing you into a bloody pulp," Locke shouted. "Kiraimezu!"
Kiraimezu!
The Kiraimezu spat out a stream of dark, black water from its mouth directly at Nalu. He jumped out of the way to avoid the attack, but the Kiraimezu did the same thing once he had landed. Nalu kept jumping and flipping to avoid the dark water, because as the water would make contact with the ground, dark spikes would emerge, creating a dangerous barrier between him and the monster. "I can't keep dodging this thing forever. I have to do something quickly." Nalu jumped up into the air and then came spiraling back down with his legs stretched outwards. He made contact with the Kiraimezu's head, but only seemed to bounce right off of it like a water balloon. He landed on the ground and then ran back at the monster, while making sure to try and avoid the spikes on the ground. He then ran towards it and very carefully slid underneath its legs, before jumping and shoving his hands into the Kiraimezu's back. This was enough force to cause the Kiraimezu to fall forwards onto the trail of spikes it had made. "Yes!" Nalu cheered. "I guess I have that strength after all." "That was a clever trick. Too bad it won't do anything for you," Locke shouted. The Kiraimezu grumbled and stood back up. It turned around and stared down at Nalu, which allowed him to see the holes made from the spikes heal and disappear almost instantly. He gulped, but didn't falter in his stance as he prepared for the monster's next move. The Kiraimezu swung its fist over its head and then slammed it into the ground in an attempt to crush Nalu. He managed to jump out of the way just in the nick of time, so all the Kiraimezu did was crush the concrete on the sidewalk into many chunks of rock. Nalu summoned his shield once again to protect himself from the flying debris. The Kiraimezu then turned around very fast and threw its fist back towards Nalu. It collided with his shield and he began to groan and grunt from the sheer force. He did his best to hold up the shield, but it began to crack after a few seconds from the sheer pressure upon it. "Crap," Nalu muttered under his breath. The shield finally broke, and Nalu was sent flying backwards once more. His left arm brushed against one of the spikes, which gave him a slightly deep cut, and he began to bleed. He landed on the pavement behind the spikes, and immediately placed his right hand over the cut to try and control the bleeding. He clenched his left fist in frustration, and slowly stood back up, glaring at Locke and the Kiraimezu. "You seem to be struggling quite a lot here, Nalu," Locke spat in a teasing tone. "Thank you for providing me with some good entertainment, though. I was looking for something to use against Seish and the others to prove that I am, in fact, the best of the group. Imagine what they'll think when I return with the medallion after I have ended you. I'll be praised, and the others will be laughed at. I'll finally have the praise and recognition I deserve." Locke began to laugh in a far more maniacal manner than before. Nalu grit his teeth and looked at the ground. "What happened? Where did all of my strength go? Why am I struggling so much?" Nalu shook his head and then stood up straight with both arms by his side. The cut would have to wait. "No, there's still more I can do. I have to keep fighting."
Kiraimezu!
The monster shot out a quick spurt of dark water from its mouth into the air, and then threw its fist into said spurt, strengthening it and sending it speeding towards Nalu. Nalu tapped the surface of the medallion with his right hand, which caused an orb of light to emerge from within it. It rose into the air above his head and elongated, at which point he reached up and grabbed it with his left hand. The light then transformed into a sword, with another burst of light. "Nalu Rapier!" Nalu shouted and then lowered the sword in front of himself. Nalu then ran forwards and jumped into the air once again.
When he reached his peak height, a pair of feathered wings sprouted from his back, and he hung in midair for a few seconds while being surrounded by a flurry of feathers. Precure, spreading Nalu feathers! Nalu held out the rapier in front of him and began to fly towards the Kiraimizu. His surge of energy and the Kiraimizu's fist hit with equal force, which stopped Nalu dead in his tracks. He grunted and groaned as he tried to put all of his power into his rapier, but the Kiraimizu was just too strong. The Kiraimizu bellowed loudly once more, and at the same time shot out even more dark water to power his punch. It completely dissipated Nalu's attack and sent him hurtling backwards once more. He slammed into the ground and cried out from the pain that radiated throughout his body upon impact, while his rapier skidded away. He laid on his stomach. Movement had been made impossible, as his strength had been completely whittled down by the Kiraimizu's attacks, and his repeated failure of stopping them. Any and all of his will to continue fighting was gone. He couldn't muster up the strength to keep trying. He was simply too weak. "Seeing you Precure in pain like this is so thrilling," Locke cheered. "I've waited so long to finish one of you off like this. Alone and without any of your friends here to back you up. You're alone, and you're going to die." Tears began to well up in Nalu's eyes. This couldn't be the end. "Finish him, Kiraimizu! Finish him and take the medallion!"
Kirai?
Nalu looked up as the Kiraimizu charged up another attack.
Mizu!
The monster shot out another stream of water from its mouth. Nalu shut his eyes and just laid there as he waited for the attack to land and end him.
Ice shield!
Nalu looked up when he heard that voice, and there stood Cure Pearl. A dome of pink ice surrounded them and shielded them from the Kiraimizu's attack. "Pearl!" Nalu shouted in relief.
Are you okay, Nalu?
Pearl asked, turning her head to look at him with a very worried expression. I'm fine.
But you're bleeding!
It's not that deep. I'm fine, Nalu said and slowly stood back up. Thank you for saving me, Pearl. Pearl smiled and blushed slightly.
Hey, that's what teammates are for, right? We back each other up and are there for each other whenever we need something. You were in trouble, so we came to you.
We? As if on cue, Tide and Reef landed a kick on the Kiraimizu's head. The stream of water coming from its mouth immediately stopped, and it stumbled backwards with a loud whine. Locke's eyes widened. What? Where did they come from? Pearl dispersed the shield just as Reef and Tide landed right next to them.
Hope you don't mind us dropping by to crash your party,
Reef commented with a cheeky smile.
We got the alarm, so we figured you needed our help,
Tide added. Alarm? What do you mean? Nalu asked.
It's one of the features of the heart shells. Guess if we're not close enough to an attack to deal with it, the heart shells alert us so we can take care of it right away,
Reef said while patting her heart shell.
They all went off at once and we followed them here. I'm really glad we weren't too late, Pearl said.
I'm really glad you guys showed up when you did. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't. Thank you. Nalu smiled at Pearl, who blushed more and looked away in response.
You're welcome,
she mumbled.
You still look like you're pretty weak, so stay here for now and regain your strength while we weaken the Kiraimizu. When you see an opening, or when we give a signal, take that chance and use your attack on it.
Got it.
Let's go, girls!
Pearl, Reef, and Tide jumped into the air and in opposite directions to draw the Kiraimizu's attention away from Nalu. Reef held out her hand, and her mirror appeared. She pointed it in the Kiraimizu's direction.
Starlight, Reef!
A beam of light shot out of Reef's mirror and hit the Kiraimizu, encasing it in a large cage of coral. The Kiraimizu grumbled and began to struggle. It punched at the barrier, but Reef put all of her focus on keeping the barrier strong. Pearl crossed her arms in front of her chest with her palms flat. Icicle pearls! She moved her arms straight in front of herself and shot out a barrage of sharp, flowing pink icicles that rained down on the Kiraimizu. It began to whine and cry as it was unable to attack. It was only focused on shielding itself. Glad I actually got to use that attack this time, Pearl commented sarcastically. It's definitely a good one, Reef agreed.
Don't lose focus, you two!
Tide landed back on the ground.
Tidal wave!
Tide slammed her hands on the ground, and out of it appeared a gigantic wave of water that slammed into the Kiraimezu. Between the force of the wave, the strength of the barrier, and the barrage of icicles, the Kiraimezu finally fell over onto its back. It whined in a dazed tone, while Locke seethed with rage. No, no, no! Get your sorry ass up and kill them, Kiraimezu! We are so close! We can't fail now! So close and yet so far, Pearl teased. She touched the gem on her heart shell. It began to glow a light pink, and many orbs of light emerged from within. These light orbs maneuvered into a line before transforming into a chain of pearls. Pearl grasped the chain. Precure! Gleaming pearl chain! Pearl lifted the chain over her head and then swung it downwards to whip it in the Kiraimezu's direction. The chain wrapped around its body, which restrained it completely and prevented it from defending itself any further. Pearl turned her head and looked at Nalu. She smiled confidently and nodded at him. He gave her the same expression and returned the nod before he got up and grabbed his rapier once more. Nalu rapier! Nalu shouted and then lowered the sword in front of himself. Nalu then ran forwards and jumped into the air once again. When he reached his peak height, a pair of feathered wings sprouted from his back, and he hung in midair for a few seconds while being surrounded by a flurry of feathers. Precure, spreading Nalu feathers! Nalu held out the rapier in front of him and began to fly towards the Kiraimezu. Right before he hit it, a sea blue colored beam of light that was surrounded by a torrent of feathers shot out from the end of the rapier. It hit the Kiraimezu and caused the feathers to surround the beast and encase it completely.
Mizu demasu.
Nalu then finished his forward movement and sliced through the Kiraimezu with the rapier, which also drew the previous flurry of feathers through it as well. He landed behind the monster and stood up straight, moving the rapier to his side with an elegant yet forceful swoosh. The purification process finished, and the Kiraimezu exploded into another flurry of feathers that flew everywhere and then dissolved into many explosions of sparkles. These sparkles caused all of the damage that had been done to the sidewalk and the area they had fought in to disappear. Everything reverted back to its normal state and looked as if nothing had ever been damaged at all. Locke grit her teeth. Son of a bitch, she muttered, and turned around, disappearing into a dark cloud. Nalu's rapier disappeared, and he turned around to thank the others. Before he could get any words out, however, he was nearly tackled to the ground by a hug from Pearl. She squeezed him tight and was very nearly burying her face in his neck. Confused, Nalu only hugged back and rubbed her back to comfort her. Hey, you okay? He asked.
I knew they would target you when you were all alone. I knew they would come for you and try to hurt you,
Pearl nearly cried.
We should have walked with you. I'm so sorry.
Hey, Nalu said and pulled Pearl off of him so he could look at her. It's okay, Pearl. I knew the risk of agreeing to help you guys on your mission and keeping the medallion with me. I knew that risk, and I still agreed to help because I want to fight alongside you. Besides, you guys still came to my rescue when I needed you. Even when I was alone and in danger, you were still there to back me up. Thank you, Pearl. Pearl blushed and looked away. Nalu smiled and then looked at Reef and Tide. Thank you guys for backing me up. Hey, it's nothing. Like Pearl said earlier, we're teammates, and we're always going to be here when you need us, Reef responded. Yeah, whenever you need us, just give us a call, and we'll be there, Tide added. Nalu smiled again. I guess I should go get those groceries now.